Hello, my name is Pete McCall, and welcome to episode 53 of All About Fitness. Today on All About Fitness, I speak with my first CFO. That actually stands for Chief Fitness Officer. I know we're used to CFO standing for something else, but today I'm speaking with John Wolf, who is the CFO, the Chief Fitness Officer for Onnit. Onnit was one of these companies I hadn't heard much about, and to be honest, I didn't really hear about it till I started listening to Joe Rogan's podcast. And, of course, if you listen to Rogan's podcast, then you know Onnit's a big sponsor of it, and I was interested in about the supplements. And so I went to the Onnit website, and I've actually been using Onnit products for a little while. I've been using their protein, their recovery protein, and their pre-workout drink. Anyway, I'm not here to give a commercial, but I'm here to talk about John Wolf. As a Chief Fitness Officer, John is really in charge of the education programming that Onnit does through the Onnit Academy. And Onnit's come out. Not only do they do supplements, but Onnit also sells equipment. I did an article on the Onnit Mace a few months ago, which is how I first got to know John. I interviewed him for that article, and then I asked him to be a host, or I asked him to be a guest. I'm the host, he's the guest. I asked him to be a guest on the podcast. So I'm actually going to have a link. If you've never used a mace or never heard about a mace, it's not just a weapon on Games of Thrones, but it's actually a really cool and unique training implement that can help you develop like unique and really killer level of fitness. Anyway, today on All About Fitness, John and I discuss a number of ways to get fit, a number of different ways, because other things that Onnit talks about or that Onnit promotes are Indian clubs. If you're not familiar with what Indian clubs are, they're an old school fitness product that Onnit is helping to repopularize. Onnit also promotes kettlebell training and heavy rope training. Anyway, today we talk about coaching. What can you do to become fitter? Because fitness isn't just how hard you work out, but fitness is your whole approach to life. What are you doing that can actually enhance everything in your life? You know, because when you look at it, exercise is only what we do in the gym. But we have about 23 other hours in the day that we have to figure out how can we be fit for those hours. So our discussion today, as you'll see just from the introduction, our discussion today starts out with fitness, but we get into a whole bunch of different things. I'm really excited for this today. I got a lot out of talking to John Wolf, and I know you'll get a lot out of this interview. So after a brief word from a couple sponsors of All About Fitness, John Wolf, the Chief Fitness Officer for Onnit. Vicor Fitness is the maker of the new TerraCore, which is a step, bench, balance trainer, and multifaceted exercise tool combined into one single platform. Go to vicorefitness.com to see the newest piece of equipment that will be taking the fitness industry by storm in 2017. Use the code AAF to save 20% on purchasing a TerraCore of your own. TerraCore by Vicor Fitness. Vicor Fitness. Better results from better products. ActivMotion bar is the first resistance training bar where 30% of the weight is a moving mass. An ActivMotion bar can help you strengthen your fascia and elastic connective tissue as well as your muscle, which is important for staying injury-free during the aging process. Research has found that exercising with an ActivMotion bar can be up to 170% more effective than using traditional weighted bars. ActivMotion bar, let the resistance move you. www.activmotionbar.com. I'm Pete McCall with All About Fitness, and I'm sitting down today with John Wolf, the Chief Fitness Officer at Onnit. Hey, John, can you give us a little bit of a background? What exactly does a Chief Fitness Officer do?
Mainly, it confuses people if I say I'm a CFO. They think I'm in a legitimate professional career like finance or something like that. But I'm a fitness professional that landed an amazing gig at this amazing company. So the Chief Fitness Officer role is something that's relatively unique to Onnit, at least as far as I know, extremely, unique to Onnit. And in that way, I have my hands in anything and everything related to fitness that comes from Onnit or the Onnit Academy. So that has to do with fitness equipment design, right? So we have a lot of unconventional tools that we manufacture and sell. We have new stuff coming out. Some of the stuff that we recently released were like licensed equipment, like the Captain America barbell plates, the bumper plates, or the Ironman kettlebell. So you get to do some cool stuff like that. But mainly, before I landed this gig, I ran a gym in California, and I was brought on to run the facility that's adjacent to the headquarters, the Onnit Academy or Onnit Gym, and the secondary role, or actually the primary role that got me here, was for education. So fitness education is near and dear to my heart. I've been teaching seminars for many years, and coming into Onnit, that's been my primary role and one of my main focuses. All the other stuff has been just an amazing surprise, to be able to do stuff on design fitness equipment and see that from conception to having a physical product in hand. That was something that I wasn't really aware I was going to be doing, and it's been a lot of fun.
And so your background in fitness, what type of, were you a personal trainer? Were you a strength coach? Like, what was your, you're running a gym, what was your specific or formal background?
Yeah. I landed in fitness, I think, like a lot of other people do. Yeah, a lot of people that find themselves fitness professionals, not necessarily something that they knew they were going to do when they were in high school or in college. I was a seeker for many years, so I just did everything, from hospitality, inbound, telesales, outbound sales, hitting the pavement, worked in behavior sciences with autistic children, worked in finance. So I've had all these different kind of eclectic experiences. And through that period of time, I always invested in my education in fitness. And what I found was a lot of the conventional wisdom that was out there didn't serve me as an individual the same way that it did when I was younger. So when I was younger, more like a powerlifting, bodybuilding influence was great. But as I got older, I just didn't get the return on investment that I wanted to see. And so I started seeking out information and traveling all over the United States to train with the foremost experts in various different fields, like Pablo Satsuline or Scott Sonnen, or when the American Kettlebell Club came out here, went and did their certification. So, there's always this ongoing evolution. Those are some early things. And then as later, as the years went on, it was just continue to expose myself to more and more prolific teachers. And what I did was I started a fitness studio. It wasn't a gym per se, but it was a 5,000 square foot studio where we brought all that information and we systematized it into something that was comprehensive and inclusive. And so, at that time, most people were doing one thing or two things, like say, since I was RKC, most of the people who have gone through RKC are now SFG, they're kettlebell centric, right? So they become the kettlebell guy or girl. And also we were swinging clubs back at the turn of 2000. So a lot of people that were club swingers, they're club swingers, and they might be, the early adopters of a lot of unconventional movement, yoga integration with calisthenics and stuff like that. So, what we found was people were dropping themselves into different buckets and kind of pigeonholed themselves in certain ways that way. And my team and I out there, we just always looked at, well, how can we integrate all that information? Good information doesn't displace good information, and we deliver that in our studio. And that's kind of like the early version of what is now our Onnit education system.
Now, because we're about the same age, and we were probably working in fitness, and we talked about this before when we interviewed before, but we've been in fitness about the same amount of time, since the late 90s, early 2000s, give or take. And this is a question I always like to ask, because I appreciate the answer, and I really respect the answer. Who do you think were your greatest influences? Like when you were first learning this stuff, I mean, you mentioned Pavel, you mentioned, he started Russian Kettlebell, or not started, but he worked with Russian Kettlebell Concepts and evolved into Strong First. And with the Indian clubs, who really kind of got your juices flowing and made you want to learn more?
as far as fitness is concerned, that was definitely, I'd say, those two teachers in different ways in terms of Scott Sonnen and Pavel Satsulin. They were the most influential early in my career, right? And so, but if I was to like take a step back and take a look at who I am as a person and the framework of how I look at myself and look at the world, and through a physical practice, what I hope to achieve, it really goes back to being a 4-year-old, fighting my parents not to push me into a martial arts studio. No, grabbing on the doors. But then finding out that, so much of who I am as a person is now heavily influenced by those experiences, those early experiences in martial art. And as far as the physical practice, it was hard-nosed conditioning, and it was a eclectic mix of martial arts even. So if we look at we're looking at this integrative philosophy, I think that goes back to even before fitness. It goes back to my martial arts days, because my sensei, he was a combatives instructor at the old infantry base, Fort Ord in Monterey, California. And he started a martial art that was an eclectic mix of a bunch of different martial experiences he had through his lifetime, and he called it Bojuka: boxing, judo, jiu-jitsu, and karate, right? It was just a blend of these things, and kind of like an early version of the martial art, very Bruce Lee-esque, Jeet Kune Do-esque. They just took what worked and stuck with those from across various different art forms. And so that early experience in martial art, then transposing that point of view into fitness and looking at, Pavel, man, I was reading Muscle Media 2000, and it was very his take on how to get the most out of bodybuilding or strength training from the conventional barbell lifts, and it was great, man. It was just phenomenal. I got tons of gains incorporating his Power to the People program. It was I loved his books. I loved his writing. It was just so down to earth and simple to assimilate. The ultimate in sophistication is simplicity, right? So for him to take these hard to grasp concepts and simplifying them for me in my 20s, and for me to be able to grasp them and use them and get the results I did was phenomenal. And so I did the RKC in 2003, and then same year, because of Pavel, I found Scott Sonnen probably around 2001-ish or 2000, right around that window. As I was doing Power to the People, I saw a quote where he was talking about Scott and how he moves. He called him the hologram man. And I was like, man, it's cool. And back then it was all VHS, so I found some crazy poor quality video online. I was like, dude, this guy moves like...
Wait. Let me stop you for a second. You mean you couldn't just type it into YouTube and watch hours of video about? You had to actually go search out information? Yeah,
man. I didn't even get YouTube when it came out, and that was several years later. People were like, YouTube is the next thing. I'm a little more dense than I maybe put on. So, but now, it's crazy to realize how easy you can access all this information, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's also to our detriment a lot of times, right? This information overload constantly. You don't have to seek out and be a good student. You just plug into the matrix and think you can upload all this data, and it just doesn't work like that until you put it into a practice, right? So that is a big shift from early 2000s from now.
But I think that's huge. But let's take a look at that for a second. I think that's huge, because when you mentioned earlier, you traveled around and went and sought out teachers, and that's a much different experience than people do nowadays. And how important do you think that was for you to kind of really take ownership of what you were learning?
Man, I think whatever it is that you value has to come at a cost, right? I mean, whether it's time or money, love, sacrifice of some sort. Because if not, it's really hard to have a perspective of how much value it has or could have for you. And that's just me though, if for me, not to toot my own horn, I think it's actually a weakness. As far as academics or education, it's always come really easy. So I didn't really value a lot of information, right? So like, okay, I can assimilate information. I can theoretically understand it, but it's all bullshit until you apply it, right? And so until you actually apply it and get the outcomes that are intended from that practice, you don't know it. You think you know it. You kind of understand it from the outside looking in. A coach that I loved working with, and I definitely took a lot of value from, Will Chung. He's kind of like behind the scenes. He doesn't do a lot of social media, but he got a really good following, quite a group all over the world. He always said, knowing is doing. He has a big martial arts background. And so, if you're not doing it, you don't really know it. And the other thing is if it's easy to acquire, a lot of times people don't have enough skin in the game to go through the longer, more arduous process of assimilating the practice. And so for me, I think it was really important. And at that time of my life, it was really important. But, not to knock the ability to have access to coaches through virtual means and things like that. But I think that more often than not, you find, say, like online coaching models, which I think are a big part of the future. The problem is compliance. The problem is everything's too easy to get to. It's just not. It's not the type of metal that people used to have to take on new practice.
And that's an important thing, because I think if it comes too easy, then you don't appreciate it, and then if you have to work for it, then you I think have a little bit more of a sense of achievement. I mean, has that kind of been your experience in this field, where if it's something that's just handed to you, you kind of tend to overlook it, whereas if you really pursue something, then you really take ownership of it. Would you agree with that?
Wholeheartedly, yeah. And I think that has to do a lot with what you're saying, is that when a lot of us were looking for things, before the age of the internet, we had to actively seek them out. And you had to actively seek a teacher out. It wasn't necessarily always easy, given that proximity wasn't necessarily there. And again, forms of communication were limited back then. But for me, that was a big part of being able to understand the value of it, because, like I said, I just had a history of being able to understand, theories, but it was just a matter of, at that point in time, I was doing plenty of things that were not productive. And so getting away, moving out of my comfort zone to do something that was transformative was a big part of the framework of creating value. And the financial investment was a big part of me saying, like, this matters a lot in this point in my life to change where I am, who I am, to where I want to be and who I want to be. So you got to have skin in the game. You have to care a lot. That's the big thing. Whether you pay for it or not, you just have to be willing to bleed for those things that you love, and be willing to go through trials and tribulations to become who you want to be. And that's, I think, a lot about what fitness really is or should be about.
I'm going to come back to that, because I think that's an important, being able to bleed a little bit. I think that's an important concept, and we're going to come back to that. But I want to ask you a little bit about Onnit itself. I've been really, I learned about Onnit from listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, and I looked it up because I work out and stuff. I'm like, let me learn about these supplements. Rogan's always talking about them, and I ordered some, and then I kind of started checking out the website, and you guys had some really cool stuff like the mace, your different approaches, kettlebells. You guys have worked with Indian clubs. And as I've kind of been learning more about it, I've been very intrigued, because you guys are really, I don't even know if you realize this, but you guys are really starting to make some waves in the commercial fitness sector. And just by kind of doing what you're doing and really being, what's the best way to put it? You're really doing a lot of integrity. You're not trying to be everything to everybody. You really have
from what I see looking outside, looking in, it seems like you have a really strong core set of principles and values that are guiding everything you do. So tell us a little bit about Onnit. What is Onnit? How to get started, and what are you guys trying to do?
Man, that is an all-encompassing question. And the reason being is because Onnit is this thing. It's kind of like this living body of work, and it's a movement. It's a cultural revolution of some sort. As much as it is a brand or a supplement company or a fitness company, and I think that's what really draws people to Onnit. People have different opinions, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. But without a doubt, it's extremely important for those of us that are leading the company from within that we do things with integrity and with intention and being guided by a core set of principles, as you had mentioned. And so, the mission of Onnit, I just happen to have this sitting on my desk. So this is an old version, and we haven't revisited. But let's just look at this and hear this out and see if it applies to where we are right now. See, our mission is to inspire peak performance through a combination of unique products and actionable information, combining bleeding-edge science, earth-grown nutrients, and time-tested strategies from top athletes and medical professionals. We are dedicated to providing our customers with supplements, foods, and fitness equipment aimed at helping people achieve a new level of well-being we call total human optimization. And so that's kind of the parent company, right? And then we have the Onnit Academy, and it really ties into the education, more about that actionable information. It expands on that. And the tools being very information related, and the education, these opportunities to go somewhere, be with like-minded people and sweat together, maybe bleed a little bit together. But in terms of bleed, I don't mean actual physical trauma or injury. I just mean effort, and the willingness to sacrifice for your and other people's well-being. And so total human optimization, I think everything goes back to this guiding principle, this kind of term that has been coined within Onnit, and what is total human optimization. And that drives this ever-expanding set of opportunities and products that we delve into. What is required to achieve total human optimization? And it's mind, body, spirit, right? So various different practices, from breath work to meditation, to yoga, to fitness, proper nutrition and supplementation. But more than anything else, we have to be honest with ourselves and honest with those other people in the marketplace, and mainly to our customers. We live off the law of reciprocity. Aubrey, I don't want to say it because I'll probably say it wrong, but it's for the good of all, right? For the good of all. And so we kind of always want to be in this position where we are, if there's give and take, we'd rather take just a little bit less than we give, right? So it was like 100 to 100, we'll take the 99 in terms of value. What we want to have is this amazing exchange of value. Our customers are winning, right? And so, and that we're constantly providing everybody with the information that we obtain through our research and our experiences that help people achieve total human optimization. And what that means right now is going to be different than what it meant 10 years ago, and different than what it means 10 years from now as we continue to evolve in our understanding of what peak performance is, and what practices can help achieve that most efficiently. And so that's really the distillation of what our goals are as a company and as a culture,
And see, one of the things that's so fascinating about looking at what you guys are doing is you have so many other companies in the fitness space, and that's where where I live and work is in commercial fitness. And you have so many companies in here in this space that are really pushing to get to next technology, to get to the wearable technology, to get to let's integrate this into our equipment, let's integrate TV, internet, all that stuff. And there's a place for that, because if somebody comes to the gym and watches the TV, while walking on the treadmill, that's much better than watching TV just sitting at home and eating crappy snacks. And that's a start. And so anything that gets anybody moving, I think, is a good thing. But I really, what I see you guys doing, though, is you guys are totally stepping away from the technology and kind of getting back to the base level of what it means to move. I mean, I think you're very aligned with MMA. I think you're very aligned with some old practices. And when we spoke before one time, the one thing that you said that really stuck out and really that I really love was you talked about our hands are made for gripping things. They're not meant for holding the screen, but they're made for gripping things. So let's talk about that a little bit. What do you mean by that, and what type of equipment does Onnit promote that fits that need?
Yeah. So as technology has gotten better, we constantly are in some ways evolving, right, as a society. But as far as how we live physically, you could argue it's moving in the opposite direction, right? There's, in terms of the physical capacity of the average person, is not getting more impressive. There are some extremely impressive individuals. You can be inspired by stories from things like Rise of the Superman, where people are a book by Jamie Wheel and I forget the other author off the top of my head. Had Rise of the Superman. Let me just pull that up real quick.
And just
Steven
to fill in,
Steven Kotler.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to fill in while you're looking. I was going to create a little bit of blank space while but go ahead, because we're talking about, using the implements. On that real quick, I think that's one thing that kind of ties in is we've had this over technology of fitness, and for lack of a better term, I think that's created almost you have all these people that go to the gym, yet they're pansies, and if they got attacked, if they're out, go back to our roots, not that anybody's this is going to happen, but they got attacked. Well, I live in Southern California, so it could happen. If a mountain lion jumped out at me while I was mountain biking, I'm pretty confident I can handle myself. I could grab a stick, I could grab a rock, and I could use it to defend myself or defend my kids. But I think a lot of people would not know how to do that, and they wouldn't have that physical literacy. And that's one thing that I see you guys crushing it, is what you guys do and the tools you guys use really promote physical literacy. So keep on going. So you're talking about, what was the name of that book, the Superman book?
The Rise of the Superman. So it's decoding the science of ultimate human performance. It's basically looking at how, in extreme sports particularly, new levels of human performance constantly are being achieved, where they're like, well, you'll never be able to achieve anything above this, and then they do. So then this ability, this understanding of what's possible, constantly, the framework is constantly challenged. But on the opposite side of the same coin, as that's happening in society, the average person is devolving as far as their ability to deal with situations like the one that you just brought up. And I think that a lot of it has to do, and not to say Onnit is going to single-handedly, be able to address what needs are out there. I think we all have to be involved in, and the whole fitness industry, has hopes to be able to make that type of change for society, but each of us as individuals have to opt in, right? And so it's a big thing. And so at the same time, the tools that Onnit sells and provides are low tech, right? Low tech, high concept. They're like pieces of iron and steel shaped in different ways with different features. Things like kettlebells, clubs, maces. Those are all lever tools to some extent. We still use barbells and dumbbells. Man, don't think we don't have a superiority complex about the tools that we're most invested in. We use all the tools, battle ropes, all these things. Provide you the opportunity to build your physical literacy, as you had made mention of, right? So how do I interact with different tools, different environments, and how does my nervous system and body respond to these different stimuli? Is it relatively intelligent, pick up on new things very quickly? We have a framework to help people be more successful in more dynamic environments. And it starts wherever you are, right? So if you're on the couch and you don't feel physically competent at all, we have an entry point for you. If you're an MMA athlete, like you said, and you're walking in the door and you're at the peak of your sport, we still can meet you where you're at and use the same framework because it is adaptive to the individuals that we're coaching. I think that's what coaching is, recognizing, adapting to that individual, and then recognizing where they want to go and providing a roadmap for success towards that end point, right? And so when you're swinging clubs, you're swinging maces, you're using battle ropes, you're using your hands particularly in novel ways. Because say you're picking up a barbell, you pick up a barbell, you interact with the barbell the same way. The bar is designed to be relatively comfortable in your hand and pull against the bony structures of your hand. Whereas a club, as you swing it, it changes orientation in different positions, in different parts of any particular drill. And the fact that those levers are acting on your hands in different ways require your hands to be more dynamic. And your hands just happen to have a huge part of allocation of your nervous system energy, right? So your hands or your face, particularly in modern man, arguably in the past. Your feet would also have a lot of real estate in your brain as well, but because we wear shoes and the way we live, that's not the case these days. So using the hands in new ways, using the body in new ways, interacting with these tools through a more triplanar approach. Polyaxial is one of the terms in Rise of Superman, the whole goal of achieving flow state through movement or through novel experiences that are ever evolving and sophisticating for the need to satisfy not only your body, but your nervous system and your brain for neuroplasticity's sake, right? So we're trying to achieve a physical state of performance, but not only that, we're trying to look at how that impacts the brain, how it impacts your emotional capacity, right? How you move is a representation of how you see yourself in these other states. And if you move in new ways, we argue you think in new ways, right? So these practices ideally will help an individual achieve or move towards this ideal of total human optimization, right?
Well, and just sorry to bump in real quick, but I think the one thing that I think listeners would be interested to hear, and I'll be interested in your reaction to this, but what we've seen is that if people exercise, if they're doing the same thing repetitively over and over again, they go, it's Monday, I'm doing chest day, it's Tuesday, I'm doing back day, or I'm going on a treadmill or elliptical, you're not feeding new information into the brain. You're not feeding new information into the nervous system. You're not feeding new forces, new loads into the tissue like fascia and muscle and all the lots of connective tissue. And so I think, people can exercise and they can do a lot of exercise at a high volume, but they're not really uploading a lot of information into their body. And what we know and what the evidence is starting to show is that if you start doing different types of exercise, so say you start learning how to use Indian clubs, all of a sudden I'm uploading a ton. I'm uploading terabytes of new information to my body, which can ultimately help enhance my cognitive performance. Do you guys use that? Is that something you guys really kind of focus on? Is really not only, because you mentioned earlier mind, body, spirit. So is that something that's the driving force within your organization? Is we're not just getting fit, but fitness should drive what our brain does or how we kind of our cognitive function.
It has to. It has to. So going back to why I landed in fitness, it quite literally is because I was strung out. So I was strung out on meth, and I needed to figure out how to improve my ability to combat this demon, right? This demon that was self-imposed, the state that I put myself in. And so, I didn't do the traditional means of looking at a clinic or anything like that. I was just like, I figured out that I wanted to be better. And then I looked back at when I was the most potentially capable of dealing with the stresses that I'm now under. And I looked back to when I was a young child or a young person in physical practice of martial arts and the bylaws and the teachings of martial art and how that could potentially empower me to win this battle I'm in right now or at that time. And so without a doubt, that's why the conventional bodybuilding and powerlifting approach wasn't giving me what I needed at that time. I needed something that was going to challenge me in a much more dynamic sphere for me to be able to walk away from the training, the physical training component, and feel more emotionally and mentally capable of dealing with the challenges that I was facing at that point in my life. And so, I was getting stronger. I was moving bigger loads. I was putting on muscle. I was 130 pounds when I started the journey, and through the conventional practices, but it just wasn't breaking through to the point where I was getting all of these other benefits that I truly needed at that point. So when I look at the different practices that we teach and that we value, it has to be about how your brain adapts, how you adapt as a human being, which is so much more than just your outward appearance physically, or even just because you can do 100 push-ups in a row doesn't make you mentally and emotionally more capable. And as a coach, my job is to get the best out of the people that I work with. So those are the things that I want to see happen concurrent with an evolution of physical state, right? And that's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask of an individual that I work with, and it's a lot to ask of me to be able to help facilitate that type of change. But, I think a lot of people that have gone through a big transformation have the ability to say that that's what they got out of it. And I think as a coach or someone in the fitness industry, we all should strive to be able to provide that level of impact. It doesn't mean, everybody's got to have their own skin in the game. We talked about that before, right? But that doesn't stop me from wanting to provide that level of care and service.
Well, so of that, you mentioned like the flow state, and we talked about this some before. And what do you mean by flow state, and how is that? And how do you use that, or how do you achieve that using the tools that Onnit provides, like a mace or like a clubs or a kettlebell? I think the mace and the clubs are much more conducive to the flow state. But describe what you mean by flow state, and how do you achieve that using your equipment?
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So flow state is kind of the easiest way for most people to tap into understanding what that means. And I think we've all experienced it at some point in our life. And hopefully, if you recognize it or you didn't, it's kind of let's just simplify and say you're in the zone, right? And flow state can mean different things in different environments. So say you're a working professional and you just got yourself to a high level of proficiency and you're in the zone at work, and next thing you know is several hours later and you've done more work than there's any way you could have projected, right? Or in a physical practice, you kind of are in the zone, and all of a sudden you realize that you've been able to perform a skill that was challenging, or you just feel that there's no internal resistance to the things that you're trying to achieve. This happens a lot with athletics, right? I remember NBA. It was a video game in the arcade back in the day. I might be dating myself, but he's on fire. He's in the zone, right?
Yeah. Totally. That's a seg. That's like, what was it? NBA. It was like the 2-on-2. I played that a lot in my fraternity days. That's like the Sega Genesis 2-on-2 basketball. Yeah, totally remember that.
Right. And then he would just yell it. He's on fire. You drop 3 in a row. He's on fire. He's in the zone. And all of a sudden it made it harder for even in the video game. It made it harder for the defenders to do anything to stop you, because when you're in that state, everything just continued to happen in your favor, right? And this is the state that we are able to achieve the greatest outcomes, whether physically or mentally or professionally. And what we find is, and through this book, right, Rise of the Superman. Actually, they made me read it before I came out here to interview. It was great.
I think I'll be picking up a copy when we get off the conversation today. In fact, I know I'll be picking up a copy when we get off the conversation.
Awesome. Yeah. And it is mainly inspirational, right? They came out with a new book. I think it's called Stealing Fire. Yeah, Stealing Fire. It's their newer book, and it continues on with a more practical application with the modern man, but not just ultimate, extreme athletes. Really cool information. But in any case, we want to elicit this state, this flow state. And that requires progressively new and challenging stimulus. And what we find, what they have found also in reinforcing it through the book, physical feats that are progressively more challenging, and generally challenging not in just like, oh, can you pick this up heavier, but challenging your vestibular system, right? Your optical system, your proprioceptive systems, your awareness of yourself in space. So polyaxial movements, things that are moving you around more axes of rotation. And so one of the systems I used to be involved in and teach was circular strength training. That's where we're swinging clubs, and that's what you're talking about, swinging clubs. So if we look at what a club is, it's an extension of your lever system, right? Or any tool is to some extent. But with these long levers, if you look at the way that your arm is configured, and we take that and we add another forearm, right, to the end of it, and we have to learn how to articulate this new lever arm. And if we look at how we can move that in space through all different axes of rotation, through different planes. Now, all of a sudden, if we take an idea, this concept, a really simple concept, you're in my space, bro, right? And you look at, well, how much space do people own right now? People own in our current life as much space as it takes to crouch over an iPhone. Thankfully, the iPhone screen has gotten bigger, but pretty much that's what it is. People are hunched over and sucked into a little screen, or sucked into your TV, or sucked into your shoulders are rolled forward, your head's in the forward translate position. Everything is focused on this one very narrow idea, goal, piece of technology, right? And so the amount of space somebody owns now is gradually shrinking in terms of their physical space that they take, because they're crouched over in this little space, but also the ability for them to move dynamically at any point in time. So say now if I move just my body through space in big arches, big round movements, just draw circles with every joint, as big as you can. How much space do you own? All of a sudden now my brain accounts for owning more space. Now you're in my space. I own the whole space that I can reach and touch because I just moved through it. So all of a sudden, proprioceptively, spatial awareness is enhanced through the proprioceptive input, so my body being aware of where I can potentially reach. Right now we take an extended lever like a mace or a club, and we swing it through those big arcs. How much more space do we take? How much more space are we aware of? Right? And so now we're just looking at owning more space. Now we start to look at being more dynamic in that space. How can we move in that space? How much of that space do we own? How many different transitional movements can we even weave together if we want to get more sophisticated and challenge our ability to be more dynamic in the way we use our body? And of course, we want to do this in a sound approach. Doesn't mean the crazier the better, right? Because it all has to be principally driven and focused around sound movement principles and basics. But at the same time, we can still move towards that outer end of awareness and be able to stimulate through these different means. And we can do it in body weight. You can do it with kettlebells. We can do it with pretty much any tool or no tool. But the goal is of being able to stimulate flow state through these different inputs, like you said earlier, right? You want to be able to challenge the body and the mind through varied stimulus. And the stimulus does have to change, though it doesn't have to change every day, and it doesn't have to be ridiculous. You don't have to stand on a balance board with a didgeridoo and a kettlebell pressing overhead. I remember seeing something like that. That's not the goal.
No, and I think what people, and I think that's because that hits home a very important concept. I think a lot of times, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, the challenge is like when we used to have to seek out information, we would just get little bits of information, and we would go back to where you'd practice in your area, I practiced in my area. We'd go back, and we would go back and practice religiously to own it. Nowadays, I think what we're seeing is people will just they'll get a little bit of information from the internet, and they don't take the time. They don't appreciate what it means. I can watch a clip of somebody swinging a mace on the internet and go out and try to replicate that without understanding that if I watch you swing a mace, you might have been working with that for 5 years before you hit record and put that up on YouTube. Meaning that you've gone through a whole series of long-term progressions, and you're showing me the pinnacle of your performance, and I'm trying to sit there and mimic that. And I think that could lead to injury. Do you think that's one of the detriments or one of the things that's really hurting the fitness industry right now? Is this kind of like we almost have too much information, it becomes this overload?
Yeah, and I think, again, not having a practice that supports the pursuit of more information for the sake of more information. So, 10,000 hours to mastery, right? 10,000 repetitions for a movement. Just because we want to vary the stimulus and be progressive doesn't mean it has to be daily, right? I mean, you still have to get the return on investment of a particular movement, and starting with the basics is still the most sound approach. We're talking about years of progression, ideally, because the more it's kind of like what you allude to. Is this to the detriment of the fitness industry? Yeah, without a doubt. Because just because you can do it doesn't make it a sound practice, right? What I mean by that is you can do feats of strength. I mean, I fell into that. I think most people do in their 20s, particularly. Look how cool I could do this.
I used to stand on stability balls back in the early 2000s. I used to be one of those knuckleheads doing squats on stability balls. I mean, that was what we did to kind of, oh yeah, this is cool. Let's look at this and look how we do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's arguable. Risk to reward is a big thing, and as I'm older and as I'm more responsible for other people's well-being than just my own, then I have to care a lot more about that. And there's a lot of learning in putting yourself in weird predicaments, and I think I learned a lot through injury and through failure, a lot through failure in business and life and in training. But that doesn't mean that was the best approach. If that's your journey, then that's your journey. But the thing with the YouTube generation and, a trainer basically looking on YouTube the night before they train people and then putting people through that without any understanding of what the demands of those drills are, even what the basis of them are, is pretty ridiculous. And just because you can do it doesn't mean you're getting the return on investment of doing it without a practice, without understanding the whys. So the big thing in our education, it's all about the why. So if you can't answer in a simple way why you're doing something with one of your clients or with yourself, you absolutely fail. You fail. Because things have to have purpose, right? People have to have purpose. The training has to have purpose. And if it's not purposeful, even if it's fun, okay, so it has to be fun. People are very experientially focused. That doesn't mean it can't be sound, right? We can make it fun. We can provide lots of variation, but it doesn't mean that it has to do so at the sacrifice of being sound and practical and principle driven. And that's kind of the challenge with consumers as well, because we're in a consumer industry unless you're in a PT clinic or a strength coach at a college, in which those cases you're going to be extremely conservative anyway, right? But as far as dealing with the consumer base of people that are hyper-stimulated and always looking for novel experiences, can you do that while giving them what they need? So give them what they want, but give them what they need. And what they want isn't necessarily to do a whole bunch of haphazard things, even though that's what experientially they're having a lot of fun with. Give them novel sensations, novel experiences around sound principles. And that's a lot of what we focus on in our education, with the tools, with the mixes, with the clubs. It's not just to do something cool and new. It's to do something that reinforces the foundations while we do something cool.
And I think that's such a strong, powerful thing. I think that's one of the reasons why Honest achieved this, this kind of exponential success. Is so many times, John, people are running around like, what's new in fitness? What's new in fitness? There doesn't need to be anything new. What works? Okay, what works is consistency, volume, intensity, recovery. You have to look at the principles of fitness. You have specificity, overload, and progression. And to some degree, you have variability. You need to have some variability in your programs. If you don't have those things, or if you don't know how to manipulate those things, do you have any chance of having a successful fitness program?
A very small chance for a very short window. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, people can get outstanding results without adhering to sound principles for 4 to 6 to 8, maybe 12 weeks. But the holes in that ship are soon to be very apparent. Injury will plague you, and backslides, and a lack of long-term progression, which has to be our goal. So again, if you go back to our education system, what we constantly espouse and teach, we are a longevity and performance system. So what is the first word? Longevity. That's what our focus is. I want you to be in the game for a long time. We have a new young coach that's dealing with primarily with NFL athletes, high-level NFL athletes. Earl Thomas, Von Millers, like a ton of young talent that are going to go make waves in the sport. And he says the best ability. Well, take a guess. What do you think is the best ability, Pete?
Is probably for in terms of training, in terms of the guys who's looking to train.
Let's just say for an athlete, especially a professional athlete, the best ability is.
I think the ability to learn and the ability to take a step back and look at what you're doing.
I'd agree with that. But as far as getting a check, the best ability is availability. That's what he tells the guys, right? And
yeah.
What makes you available is making sure that you train and keep your body well maintained, right? Like you said, recovery is a big part of it. Training in a way where you're not putting your body at undue risk. Being ready for the call. Making sure that you're in the best position to make the play, right? And that means, getting off the bench or answering the phone and being game ready whenever necessary. So, that takes a longevity approach.
It's being prepared. It's being prepared for the opportunity. When I played rugby, I was well aware that I was the number 2 hooker on my club, and I played at a pretty high level of rugby. And my job was to push the number 1 and to push him to be better. And my secondary job was to be ready. So when something in rugby, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So when something happened to the number 1 guy and they needed to go in, I was ready.
He's the best guy at that point, right?
And I understood my role. I understood my role. I wasn't there. The fact that I was playing at a high level is beyond. I was way above my natural athletic ability, but my desire to be a part of the team and my desire to play the sport meant that I was able to earn that spot. And so I kicked my butt, and I loved training with my buddy. I mean, he started ahead of me. I didn't care. Because when we trained together, I pushed him, he pushed me, and it made the whole theory was when you do that, what happens if you and I are trained together, even though you might be starting ahead of me, what happens if what happens as a result of that?
You both get better, and
we both get better, and it's the greater good. We all get better.
We all get better, yeah, and the team gets better. I really think that's another part that's an important aspect of what needs to happen is we do need to work in teams, right? We're kind of more pack animals than we give ourselves credit for, especially in this economy, particularly, right? And in this society, right? It's very individualistic, celebrates the individual, which is great, but the individual needs to be supported by a tribe, right? And a team. And so what you had just said about being the second guy and then pushing the first guy, that's a big part of, I think, what we're doing at Audit. We're constantly looking at building our team, and it's been a process. I inherited some folks that were here, and they had already had an idea of what they wanted to do, so assimilating them into a new culture was a challenge, and then now they're extremely high achievers within our goals and what we want to achieve and how we want to influence the market. But it was a big part of what you said, too. It's like, hey, you know what? You have, say, like your staff, your coaching staff, your head coach, or even administration, whatever it is, right? And then those people are keeping people accountable from the top. And then you got to have hungry people chomping at people's ankles. And you apparently sounded like you were that guy for quite a long time. And that kept you motivated and kept the guy in front of you motivated, right? So I call it like the little brother the little brother impact. So one of my little brothers is really a lot. You're 16 years younger than I, and then the middle brother, he was born with a developmental disability, and so he didn't. They told he had a hemispherectomy. They said he wouldn't walk or talk after they did a partial removal of his right hemisphere of his brain. It's very experimental at 3 years old at UCSF. It was a really trying time for the family, right? And so for a long time, you know, he just kind of scooted around. His right arm is extremely strong. His left arm has this palsy. So that's another thing why I think, like, seeing how he's evolved has been really inspirational for me to see, well, hey, well-bodied people, you don't got too many excuses when you start being exposed to what people with inherently less can achieve, right? And so the little brother syndrome really important to me, because when my younger brother was born and he started doing things, developing at a regular rate, all of a sudden the older brother, even with his challenges, recognized his role, right? And he said, no, I'm the older brother. He didn't say it, but you could see the shift, right? And so when my younger brother started talking, he started talking more coherently. When my younger brother started walking, he's all of a sudden figured out how to walk. And this is kind of an odd thing, because if you know anything about the nervous system or the brain and how it supposedly works, the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body, which totally makes sense. The left side of his body is stiff and palsy. His leg is that side of his body is relatively atrophied. But he still has to coordinate that, or he can't walk, right? So he's had a full hemispherectomy. He had a secondary procedure. He still walks and talks and has a great sense of humor. Not normal functioning by society standards, but pretty miraculous. And so I just think, as an individual, you can be really driven, but it's really powerful to take into the power to be driven by the power of the tribe. And I think that's a really important thing that even though with Instagram and Insta fame and everything, people are celebrating the individual. It's great to celebrate the individual, but to understand that we are going to thrive or die on the support or lack of support of the tribe, right? And so, and going back to team sports and what you brought up there, I think is just a huge part, because from my experience, it was a different venue, my family. But I look at that in every coaching environment, every small or large group coaching environment as well. You have your peer leadership. And if they set the tone for what's achievable, it's pretty amazing what people behind them start doing and how fast they start doing it. So,
and that's a powerful thing, John. And I really appreciate you sharing the story about your brother and too your personal. You kind of alluded to it in an earlier conversation we had. In terms of your struggle, of overcoming meth. I've been in recovery myself a number of years, and have had a few stumbles along the way. And it's never, I never look at it. We talk about, and I go to meetings, whether or not I don't know if other people do. It doesn't matter for them. And I don't talk about this much on the podcast, or professionally, but I go to meetings, and one of the things I love about going to meetings is, you hear about the progress, not perfection. And I think in fitness, that's an important kind of mindset is we got to remember we're here to get better today. I don't care what you did yesterday. That's yesterday. We can't worry about tomorrow because it's not here, but what can we do today? Today we can work on getting 1% better. Now with that, the one question I'm going to ask, and then I'll let you go, is your workshops with the On-It Academy. I attended part of your workshop in Carlsbad recently, and I really appreciate that, man. It was a great experience. How many people do you get coming to the On-It Academy who are fitness professionals, and how many are just general consumers who want to learn more about fitness? Because I see what you guys have done is you've created this education space that traditionally education's been for fitness professionals, trainers, coaches, whatever, to learn the skills of their trade. But more and more, I see people doing it like to face the general public, like Strength Matters. We miss each other there, but Strength Matters, when it was here in San Diego, you're getting these workshops they're kind of like for that super consumer, not quite professional person. So at the On-It Academy, how many people are fitness professionals or strength coaches, and how many people are general consumers?
That's a great question, man. Well, when we design our workshops and our seminars, it was really important to cater to those super consumers, which you were just saying, the people that are the fitness enthusiasts for personal improvement. Because remember, my story is I was putting myself up all over the United States, flying myself all over the place. And I was not a fitness professional. I was doing that in the early 2000s. I didn't start training anybody professionally for money until 2007. So, and I wouldn't know I'd be in a position I'm in right now with On It at that time. So there's no way I could have known the return on the investment I was going to have other than investing in myself. And I like to tell people that at these seminars because I don't want them discounting the value that they can bring themselves, their families, their communities, and potentially be in some type of role if they choose to professionally, making the transition if that's their passion and that's their calling, right? And so when we design our education, it has to speak to four distinctly different demographics from a shared experience, and that's the consumer, the fitness enthusiast, the young professional, trying to find a lens, a framework that they can adopt that allows them to grow. And I really am excited about those two people because they tend to be the most able, the most pliable, right? They're the least attached to something that prevents them from assimilating the information, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't continue and make sure we challenge ourselves to cater to a higher level of education as well, and we do. And we really thrive on it, and we love getting feedback from those people who do have different perspectives. So the next ones will be evolved coaches. Evolved coaches are people who have either been training, their personal training age is high, their professional training age is high. They may be strength coaches and working in scale with teams, right? So, but they're generally, I look at coaches, this evolution of trainer to coach is the ability to understand long-term progression and to execute that within their client base, whether it's end-use consumer or with team sports, right, or athletes. And then the last one are like educators in other systems, which we love having. We love hearing the perspectives where the through lines are consistent. We really do a lot of work to try to make sure that what we teach is universally acceptable. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to agree about everything, but the underlying principles have to be sound, and principles are hard to argue against, right? That's kind of the whole point, right? And so our perspective and our approach might be different, but we will agree on more than we'll disagree on. And I really enjoy those experiences and conversations. And then in addition to those other educators, we have therapists, clinicians, chiros, PTs, people that are in medical field and have a different hat that they are wearing, that they're looking at this information through, different lens that they're looking at the information through. And so our challenge and our goal is to have the ability to serve all of those people in one shared experience and to allow for the people that are casual users or passionate end users to grow from the experience of sharing that space with those clinicians and other educators, and having an open dialogue where everybody's perspectives, questions, point of views are celebrated. Because, man, I'll tell you what, the high-level coaches and the clinicians and the educators need to hear what the people on the other side of the educational spectrum are experiencing and have questions about, and vice versa, right? And we all get to do that in one shared space. I think that the evolution of everybody is enhanced as a result, and that's where we fit. So if you want a purely professional in terms of like clinician focused education, that's not us. But if you want to bridge the gap, if you want to learn how to because the smarter people don't communicate more effectively generally to regular folks, the laymen, right? So we want to be that bridge. We want to bridge the clinician to the end user to the clinician. We want to be able to have a common shared experience that allows for those very different people to serve one person, the client or the patient, and in a dynamic way. And that doesn't mean we have to be the only tool set that they adopt. As they further that practice, they can find a lot of other frameworks that help achieve that goal. But we definitely want to foster an environment that allows for these type of experiences to happen. And
so real quick, sorry to kind of cut you off there, but just to wrap it up. But where can people find out more information about the On It Academy?
Yeah, just type in onitacademy.com, or I think, and click on the certification tab. Moving forward, that we're going to change that to education tab, because certifications isn't where we want to only be workshops, certifications, online workshops for those that need access that are abroad or have other demands in life and still want the information. Again, we still have to work through it, otherwise you don't know it, but we don't want to disservice anybody by not making that information available.
That's cool. And then what's coming up for the next couple of years for Onnit? Like, how are you guys planning to take over the fitness world? Because whether or not you know it, I see it happening and slowly evolving.
Strategic partnerships, man. The takeover concept is something that we've had to work on. I think a lot of times Onnit is perceived as a big powerhouse brand, and we're still a small company. Still primarily the revenues come from supplements. And the reality is, from a fitness perspective, again, inclusive, integrative, we want to work with other open-minded professionals and systems that allow for those ideas to integrate and to create a bigger impact, and that we can share our networks through that experience as well. We already have a lot of relationships like Andrea Spina, Mike Fitch, the GMB fitness crew, a lot of the previous relationships that I had in the past that we like to still play in the same sandbox with. But I think looking forward, there's a lot of potential strategic partnerships that we're pursuing right now. I'll save you from the details, but that's the goal, and not taking over, but to complement what they already do well, right? We have this huge tool set, and just being able to say, hey, have you thought about this, as it complements what you're already doing? And instead of taking over, just being in a position of servitude to those people and to their communities.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I'll have all the links below in the show notes, because these guys, and I probably overstepped, leaned a little bit too far with my skis and saying take over. But I just, a lot of the conversations I've had with my colleagues, we've all been taking note, just kind of in terms of what you guys are doing and who you guys are, who you guys are. And I'm talking about Matt from Equinox and John Bauer and these guys. And it's just fun to kind of talk with them and to have that shared experience. Well, John, I really appreciate your time today. And John Wolf, the Chief Fitness Officer of Onnit, or is it just Onnit Academy?
Yeah, Onnit Labs, Chief Fitness. That title is for Onnit, so you got it, man. It's all good.
As you can tell, I really had a lot of fun with that conversation. I'd only met John one or two times before. Well, I'd only met him one time in person when I sat in on some of the kettlebell workshop that Onnit taught in Carlsbad not too long ago. And then I had one or two other conversations with him over the phone, one for an article I wrote on the Mace. So I really enjoyed getting to know John through this conversation. And I really hope that you got a lot out of this, everything from coaching, from understanding maybe how you can move a little bit differently. Because I think that's one of the cool things that Onnit's doing. Onnit's really disrupting the way that we do fitness right now. There are a lot of people like myself, a lot of fitness educators who are really intrigued by how Onnit is positioning itself, because they started out as just a supplement company. I mean, they're selling supplements to enhance human performance. And now they've moved into the education realm. They sell products, but what they're doing is they're selling education to support the products. So if you're a super consumer, or what we call, a fitness consumer or fitness super consumer, then you might want to look into taking Onnit education. One of their 2 or 3 day Onnit Academy workshops might be great for your needs, because it's a great way to learn about how to do fitness. When I did the kettlebell workshop in Carlsbad, of the people participating, probably only 50% were fitness professionals. The other 50% were just, people that wanted to learn more about kettlebell training. There were people that took Onnit supplements and they had seen the advertising on the Onnit website, and whether they bought a kettlebell or two through Onnit, they wanted to learn more about kettlebell training. And I really think that's one of the things that's changing about fitness, is you're starting to see more workshops directly for consumers. You want to learn about strength training, instead of going to your local gym and working with a trainer, you can now travel and take strength training workshops with some of the top strength coaches in the country. That's changing. We're starting to open up. And I know that's one of the things I'm looking at for the next year or so, is I'm looking at how can I develop a workshop for whether you listen to my podcast or read my blogs, the American Council on Exercise. How can I do a workshop to help you learn more about how to use fitness to enhance your life? Now, one thing, I owe John a huge debt of gratitude. John, if you're listening, thank you very much. Because after our conversation, I picked up The Rise of Superman by author Steven Kotler. And I have to say, that book really was just very insightful. In my youthdom, when I was a kid, I used to do BMX and skateboarding. So I used to go flying through the air on a little bike or go jumping off a ramp on a skateboard. Not very successfully. I did race BMX for a while, but I definitely stayed on a two-wheel device rather than a four-wheel skateboard. But what I loved about that was the thrill it gave, the challenge of trying to learn a new trick or going riding on some new jumps. And reading about Rise of Superman, the Rise of Superman is looking at how extreme sports evolved so quickly. Back when I did BMX in the 80s, doing a 360 was a big thing. Now, only 30 years later, not only they're doing 360s, they're doing 2 or 3 360s in a row while doing backflips in the air. I mean, that's absolutely sick. Even now in my 40s, I love watching the X Games because having done some of that in my youth, I am just amazed by what they're doing now. But anyway, back to this idea of the flow state. In The Rise of Superman, Steve Kotler talks about the flow state, the state of just being present in the moment. That's one of the ways these extreme athletes are able to really thrive, is because when they're doing their sport, whether they're doing BMX or they're jumping out of an airplane or they're doing downhill skiing, the adventure skiing, they aren't thinking about what happened yesterday. They're not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. They're in the present. So since having this conversation with John and recording the podcast, I read Rise of Superman. I've started mountain biking again. Now, I love mountain biking. I don't race BMX anymore, but, when I'm riding regularly, I ride 1 or 2 times a week. I hit some trails here in San Diego and Southern California, and I love it. I love being able to fly downhill. I don't do the gnarly jumps, but I'll do some drop-offs. I'll take the tires off the ground a little bit, but I just love that. I love the challenge it gives. I love the physical challenge, and I love that, finding that flow state, because when you're flying downhill, you're climbing a hill and you're struggling to get up the hill, each crank harder than the next. You really, yesterday doesn't matter. You're not thinking about what's going on tomorrow. You're focused on the now. So I'm going to try to see if I can get Steve Kotler as a guest on the podcast. And if you haven't read the book, after hearing John talk about it, and you can hear my enthusiasm for it, I really recommend The Rise of Superman. I'll have it down in the show notes. Because if you're looking for an excuse for why you should be exercising, or you're looking for an excuse for what else you could be doing, trust me, after reading it, I've been researching skydiving schools here in San Diego. My wife's not thrilled about it, but I've been telling her I need to pick up a new hobby, and so we'll see how that goes. More on that later. Anyway, but I want to say thank you for tuning in. It really was such an honor to speak with John Wolf. I think he's one of the guys that's really changing the way we're looking at fitness, and you're going to be seeing a lot more out of On It. They got a couple deals working on. They've been privy to a little bit of background information. I can't really go into detail about them, but I know that in the next 6 to 12 months, you're going to be seeing a lot more about On It. Not just if you're a Joe Rogan fan, but if you're a fitness consumer, if you're really into fitness, if you enjoy working out, go check them out. Onnit, ONNIT.com. I'm a fan of their supplements. I use them on a regular basis. No, they're not paying me to say that. I just happen to like their products and think that they work. So anyway, thanks for stopping by All About Fitness. My name is Pete McCall. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can. My Twitter handle is PeteMC_fitness. My Instagram handle is PeteMcCall_fitness. I try to put out relevant fitness information on both. I do a lot of blogging. I blog on my own website, PeteMcCallFitness.com, so you can check that regularly for blogs. I'm trying to post 1 or 2 a week. And I also blog for the American Council on Exercise. So if you want to read the science, I write a lot about the science of how our body adapts to exercise. You can read that on the American Council on Exercise. That's ACE Fitness, ACEfitness.org. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. If you have any questions or comments or any guests you'd like me to book, you can reach me at Pete@PeteMcCallFitness.com. My email is Pete@PeteMcCallFitness.com. A huge thank you to John Wolf, a huge shout out to On It, and thanks for stopping by All About Fitness, and look forward to having you cruise by for other episodes in the future.